lesson, I will discuss the differences between conventional cartography and critical approaches to map making. These are particularly relevant when we use mapping as a tool of inquiry, dialogue, and interaction with communities in order to represent complex social practices and dynamics. A traditional understanding of maps is that they convey information. So a knowledge of the world already understood and known to the map maker is represented in a form that can be easily understood by others. But of course, a map is an edited document. It doesn't show everything. We could say that a key feature of all maps could be their ability to visually depict different realities by distilling and privileging some information over others. If this is true, then all maps are propositions, because the process of map making itself generates new knowledge. It also means that maps are always political and should be read as such, including paying close attention to the conditions of their production. Maps are also always partial and perspectival, regardless of their claims to authority. The relation of maps to representation is therefore fundamental. They frame, codify, and distill. Maps show a particular point of view on the world. That this quality of maps is often hidden or left unacknowledged is an important issue for a more critical approach to map making. Conventional cartography often takes what has been described as a God's view or a bird's eye view. Maps are shown from above in a way that claims authority and complete knowability. What is left out of such maps is deemed not to be there. A good example are the often missing traces of generations of use by indigenous groups from official land use maps, or the fact that informal settlements are not included in many maps produced by governmental authorities. In both cases, not being included in the representation of a place means that the people and their claims to those places are left unacknowledged. Embedded within the question of what to map is the question of how to map. The maps we use in everyday life, such as those available on Google or the paper maps we relied on to navigate in the past, leave out much. Scale, color coding, longitude and latitude do not account for temporality, touch, memory, relations, stories, and narratives. In fact, it is experience that is altogether removed. Rather than only mapping the physical qualities of space, we could also map the social relations embedded within a place, the way people use a space, or the overlapping claims made on a particular area by different groups of people. Such mapping requires different techniques to those of conventional cartography. We might need to find ways of representing blurry boundaries, fuzzy edges, varying scales, and novel points of view. One example would be of how to map a route. It sounds simple. In a standard map, we are given a scale. A centimeter might be equivalent to a kilometer. And there is usually a familiar legend or key, where a certain type of line denotes a road, a railway, or a building. But if we were to ask a migrant to draw a map of their clandestine journey across borders, the scale might change according to the difficulty of each part of the journey. Crossing mountains on foot takes a long time, and small hidden tracks away from the border guards take on great importance. The legend might omit main roads, but include hidden places of refuge or unnamed river crossings. So in order to make a map, we must think about the purpose of the map and its audience. In being explicit about how knowledge is produced, situated and critical maps propose versions of the world rather than making truth claims about it. Next, I will talk through a few examples of critical cartography or counter-mapping. These are maps that show another reality from that depicted in conventional representations. Bureau d'Etudes are a group of graphic designers whose maps address the growing role of networks in our everyday lives, from the vast corporate, consumerist, and military networks that are an integral part of the workings of capital, to the diffuse cultural and social networks that resist their power and offer alternative possibility. This map, European Norms of Word Production, shows the organizational and power structures behind the European Commission, revealing the dominant sources of power through thick black lines. To make such maps, painstaking research needs to be carried on in archives and on the internet. The group Atelier d'Architecture Autogérée uses mapping as both a representational device and a way of working with their special projects. In this drawing, loops drawn between people, places, and objects represent the different networks that make up the space. They show how certain people gradually become embedded within the project as they make new relationships and involve themselves in more activities. Such mappings require close knowledge of the project or the place in question, which can be achieved through carrying out interviews, observing, chatting, and above all being present in the space. The architectural group Cora create maps that use the act of walking as a deliberate methodology for understanding an area. They use architectural drawing conventions, such as sections and elevations, to guide their walks, and then through close observation, they record their impressions in corresponding sectional and elevational drawings. The final example is from the colonizing architecture, who are interested in how the legal status of a space affects its use. The colonizing architecture use archival research combined with interviews with lawyers and people who use the area to create such maps. What becomes apparent from these examples is that the type of data that is collected and the way it is collected will have a big impact on what the map is able to show. So, to summarize, maps are political documents that aim to show a particular point of view. To be aware of this fact is to also be aware of the many omissions and silences present in conventional cartography. When thinking about making a map, it is important to be aware of who and what the map is for, how the information for it will be collected, and what that means for the types of information you are able to get. The type of graphics and visual representation to be used will also be dependent on the information collected and the intended audience. Finally, it is also important to remember how the map will be shared and circulated.